Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep into an incredibly powerful and, I think, necessary book.
Mhm.
It's Jamie Lee Finch's You Are Your Own, A Reckoning with the Religious Trauma of Evangelical Christianity.
Yeah.
Our goal in this deep dive, really, is to understand what religious trauma actually means,
Right.
explore its profound impact on individuals, and crucially, look at the path to healing that the author maps out.
It's quite a remarkable work, actually, because it blends academic insights, research, with really deeply personal lived experiences.
Yeah.
And that makes it resonate on so many levels. Jamie Lee Finch, she's an embodiment
Right.
coach,
Okay.
and she specializes in guiding people through healing from this kind of religious trauma and also sexual suppression.
Mm-hmm.
So this deep dive into her work, it aims not just to, validate and maybe comfort survivors,
Right.
but also to genuinely educate those who might be less familiar with the complexities of experiences within evangelical Christianity.
The author shares this fascinating observation about the two main reactions she gets when she tells people what she does.
Oh, yeah.
For those mostly outside evangelicalism, especially maybe after things like the 2016 election,
Mm-hmm.
the question is often, how did we get here? Can you explain this to me?
Right. Understandable.
She points out that, 81% of white evangelical Christians voted for Trump, often influenced by really prominent figures like Jerry Falwell Jr. and James Dobson.
Yeah, big names.
And she even draws connections to acts of terror, like the Austin bombings committed by a white male who was raised evangelical.
Wow.
And she notes how the media often struggles really to grasp the full extent of extremism within this particular subculture.
And that's kind of where the bigger picture comes in, isn't it?
Mm.
Finch suggests the media's difficulty in properly classifying that kind of violence.
Yeah.
It stems, partly anyway, from a lack of cultural understanding,
Yeah.
about these subcultures within evangelicalism and their potential to, lean towards extremism.
Right.
But then, for those who've actually left the fold,
Mm-hmm.
the response is almost always, I get it, I've been there, me too.
A very different reaction.
Totally. So this deep dive, using Finch's insights, it offers a language, maybe, to comprehend that internal sickness.
Sickness.
Yeah. Not just the visible signs of institutional problems, but the profound impact on individual bodies and minds.
So why does this matter to you listening right now? Jamie Lee Finch makes a really vital assertion here.
Mm-hmm.
Religious trauma leaves significant, long-lasting imprints on the brain and the body, especially for those raised within evangelicalism.
That's a big claim.
It is. And she quotes Dr. Wendell Waters, who points out that mental health professionals, they often note a patient's religious background in reports.
Okay, standard practice.
But, and this is the key part, the possibility that the patient's experiences with religion could have had some role to play in the production of symptoms is never entertained.
Wow. So it's noted, but not really considered as a factor.
Exactly. And Finch's work really seeks to bridge that exact gap,
Yeah.
to provide language and validation for healing.
Okay, so to really get into the depth of this trauma, maybe we should start by unpacking evangelical Christianity itself.
Good idea. Because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but maybe isn't fully understood in this specific context.
Right.
What are its defining characteristics, according to the author?
Well, Finch clarifies that, in the Western world anyway, the key distinguishing features usually include a belief in the Bible's literal interpretation.
Okay, literal.
And its historical accuracy,
Uh-huh.
also the divinity, death, and resurrection of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and the absolute necessity of a personal conversion experience, being born again for salvation.
That makes me wonder about its history. Like, how did it get to where it is now?
Yeah, Finch explains that modern evangelicalism actually arrived at its current form through a fundamentalist evolution in the 20th century.
So there's a connection to fundamentalism.
Definitely. Chris Ladd even notes that evangelicalism today has been co-opted as a preferred description for Christians who are looking to shed an older, largely discredited title, fundamentalist.
Interesting. So it was kind of a rebranding.
In a way, yeah. And what's really insightful about this evolution is something called the Great Reversal.
The great reversal.
Yeah, it happened roughly between 1900 and 1930. Michael Gerson talks about how Northern evangelicals before the Civil War were actually big on social justice.
Really? Like what?
Things like temperance, prison reform, abolition. Wheaton College, for example, founded by abolitionist evangelicals in 1860.
Okay.
It welcomed African-American and female students, was even a stop on the Underground Railroad.
That's not the image many have today.
Not at all. But Gerson points to this huge pivot. While some progressive evangelicals were trying to find common ground, between faith, new biblical criticism, science,
Mm-hmm.
religious conservatives reacted really strongly against that.
How so?
Well, that reaction fueled the rise of fundamentalism, which became, in Gerson's words, simplistic and over-literal in its reading of Scripture,
Hmm.
anti-scientific, and saw the whole concept of social justice as a dangerous liberal idea.
Wow, so that great reversal just fundamentally reshaped the whole movement.
Completely changed its trajectory, and this profound shift solidified a really deep political identity.
Right.
White evangelicalism became this major force in political conservatism and the religious right, from the late 70s through the early 2000s.
And this focus on political power.
Almost obsessive, the author suggests, pursuing dominant political power.
When you look at that, it brings up the Southern Baptist denomination, right? Their specific role in all this.
Yes, absolutely. The author highlights its extremely problematic history, as she puts it,
Rooted in.
rooted in a commitment to white supremacy. Southern pastors actively shaping theology to, well, thrive under what she calls a terrorist state during slavery.
That's strong language.
It is. And Chris Ladd drives it home, saying this denomination, which is America's second largest Christian denomination,
Still huge today.
right, it remains defined right down to the name over the door by an 1845 split over slavery.
So the origins are inescapable.
Very much so. And for the author, this whole political and religious setup was her childhood environment. She was raised Southern Baptist.
Okay, so this is personal experience informing the analysis.
Deeply personal. And she makes it clear her work isn't really about the Bible itself or the historical Jesus,
But about.
but about the religion that I believe not only cannot be found in the Bible, but that Jesus never intended to create. That's her focus. She observes that these specific harmful beliefs, while maybe not shared by all mainline Protestants,
Right.
they're strikingly consistent across most evangelical churches, and they've, quote, infiltrated the larger arena of Western society
Yo, through what channels?
through family, education, even secular legislation such as laws regarding sexuality and reproduction, which, she notes, Jerry Falwell proudly claimed was his goal.
That infiltration aspect is significant. It makes me think, how did these beliefs take such deep root and last?
Well, Finch gets into the concept of biblical inerrancy.
Right, you mentioned that earlier, the idea that the Bible is without error.
Exactly. The conviction that it's without error in the original writings and stands as the ultimate authority by which every realm of human knowledge and endeavor should be judged.
Every realm, that's sweeping.
Totally. And this foundational belief, she argues, is what underpins a pervasive danger.
So ultimately, even though evangelicalism is a huge part of the U.S. population,
Nearly a quarter, yeah, and once held massive influence.
Finch is saying that the white evangelicalism I was born into was no different in reacting against cultural progress.
Right. By the 1950s, she argues, evangelical belief was less rooted in the teachings of the Rabbi Jesus,
And more focused on.
more concentrated in maintaining a morality measured by upholding societal decorum and traditional gender roles, basically advocating for disciplined lives in full submission to authority.
That context of reacting against change seems key. So stepping back, the 60s and 70s, the sexual and political revolution.
Oh yeah, that really ignited a further reactionary surge of fundamentalism, particularly in the South.
And leaders like Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson.
They seized that moment, jumped onto the national political stage, formed groups like the Moral Majority,
Right.
and they vehemently opposed what they called evils,
Mm.
things like racially integrated schools, comprehensive sex ed, abortion, homosexuality.
So the culture wars really heated up then. What does Finch identify as a key catalyst?
What's truly striking, she says, is that a key catalyst was indignation over the federal government's attempt to desegregate evangelical colleges.
Desegregation. Wow.
Yeah, and figures like James Dobson from Focus on the Family, they weaponized their platforms then, warned of all these threats from secular culture.
Spreading fear.
Exactly, disseminating fear-based language. Jessica Wilbank's memoir apparently describes getting letters about, teenage pregnancy, child molesters, gay teachers, just constant warnings.
That leads us to a really crucial point about the belief system itself. Finch describes it as binary.
Yes, deeply damaged, she calls it. And entrenched in the language of the binary, everything is either right or wrong, black or white.
No room for nuance.
Very little tolerance for nuance, or even recognizing personal preference and agency. But she's also quick to say, look, while her experience isn't unique, this kind of thinking isn't only in evangelicalism.
Okay, fair point. So what's her hope with this work then?
She hopes to bring some levity from a psychological and behavioral perspective.
Levity, like understanding.
Yeah, understanding.
Yeah.
She emphasizes, look, people have freedom to choose beliefs, of course,
But
but it is imperative that we begin honestly discussing the consequences of many of the beliefs upheld within evangelical Christianity.
consequences.
She lists harmful doctrines often taught to vulnerable kids. The rapture, the idea of redemptive violence, eternal torture, inherited sin,
Heavy stuff for kids.
incredibly heavy. Also, the impurity of the female body. And this idea you can't achieve God's love without totally surrendering to the system's beliefs, even when they contradict each other.
Okay, so let's shift now to the core beliefs that impacted the author directly. That personal cost. It starts with original sin, right?
Right. The evangelical personal salvation story begins there. Adam and Eve chose knowledge over God, disobeyed.
And that condemned all of humanity.
Condemned everyone to be born sinners. Yeah. With corrupted bodies and souls. That's the starting point.
That must profoundly affect how you see yourself.
Oh, absolutely. The belief instilled is that humans are just born with this urge to rebel against goodness. We always need rescue from God's wrath.
And our bodies, our humanity.
That's the really damaging part. The teaching that everything that makes us human, our bodies, our flesh, are instinctively bent towards disobedience and evil.
So you can't trust your own nature.
Exactly. And it makes it incredibly hard, not just to have compassion for others outside the faith, but even for yourself.
And here's where it gets, well, really stark personally for Finch. This narrative that self-esteem is evil.
Evil. Not just discouraged, but evil.
That's what she says tainted her formative years. Only God-esteem was allowed. Because her self, her true self, her flesh, was so corrupt that it could not be believed nor supported on its own.
Yeah, it's intense.
She felt forced to fight against, resist, and put to death her own flesh, leading her to hate, vilify, blame her own body from a really young age.
So from that viewpoint, safety must have felt totally conditional.
Entirely conditional on sticking to the beliefs, to resist repentance, to doubt. That was seen as believing in herself too much.
Which meant?
Which meant you were actively being deceived by the devil. She talks about sacrificing years to prayers, confessing guilt constantly, writing journal entries about being bad and dirty.
Wow.
Deeply believing everything I wanted was bad, simply because I wanted it.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And as a girl, the messages must have been even more complicated.
Particularly devastating, she says, regarding her female body and sexuality. She was taught her body was the root of evil and had even caused the initial fall of man in the first place.
Blaming Eve, essentially.
Pretty much. She internalized that her body wasn't safe, leading to what she describes as heaps and loads of sexual shame and guilt.
And this connects to her eating disorder.
She says this foundational belief system played a crucial role. She genuinely believed that by staying small, literally physically small, she wouldn't anger my mother or God.
That really highlights the impact of purity culture.
Right, which you mentioned emerged in the 80s, pushed total abstinence until marriage.
Yeah, and its damage came from labeling dating as dangerous, promoting gender inequality, defining the body as the root of evil.
So natural human desires
were seen as ungodly and dangerous. They had to be suppressed, fought against, to be holy.
This whole worldview sounds like it would create just immense anxiety.
Paralyzing anxiety, Finch describes. Deep fear of disappointing a God who had somehow seen fit to murder his own son.
That phrasing really hits hard.
It does. She learned to fear hell, obviously, but also her own eternally and inescapably corrupted self.
And teaching eternal torment to kids.
Led to vivid nightmares, anxiety attacks about heaven, hell, eternity. Just constant dread.
And the stories used to reinforce this. You mentioned one earlier.
Oh, yeah, the chilling one. Reading a book by this popular evangelical pastor, his own grandmother died, unsaved.
Yeah.
Right. So presumably in eternal torment.
And his takeaway was
that he simply needed to trust that somehow her torment spoke to the reality of the goodness of his God. The mental gymnastics there are just staggering.
She actually imagined people she knew burning in a lake of fire.
Yes, and she shares this poem she wrote when she was 13, titled Reality.
Okay.
It's about her best friend dying in a car crash and screaming from hell that it was the author's fault for not sharing the cross.
At 13, that shows the level of guilt.
Exactly. She says it illustrates the debilitating guilt, shame, and fear that was instilled over salvation, or the lack of it.
And this fear even affected her social interactions.
Totally. Taught to fear non-evangelicals. She had an anxiety attack, aged 8 or 9, just being invited to a Catholic church.
Why? What was the fear?
Genuinely terrified she'd be brainwashed, or that God wouldn't let her into heaven if she went.
Wow. And all of this tied back to a core theology.
Penal substitutionary atonement, that's the technical term.
Right. The idea that Jesus was punished by his Father for sinners.
Yes, to satisfy God's anger and need for justice. She describes internalizing this as redemptive violence, believing in the value of wrath to bring about my forgiveness and redemption.
That's a heavy concept to internalize.
Incredibly. She shares another poem, written at 14, later published, about how her sins caused Jesus' suffering. Like, because I cheated, they placed a crown of thorns upon your head. Direct cause and effect.
That's intense personal responsibility. And then there was the rapture teaching.
Oh, yeah. Songs about it, sermons about it. This belief Christians would just vanish, go to heaven before some apocalyptic war.
Leaving everyone else behind.
Leaving others left behind to face destruction. She vividly recalls crying every single night her parents were away.
Fearing what?
Fearing she'd been left behind.
Oh.
Or imagining having to face this giant war all alone. Just crippling fear for a child.
And this belief system also endorsed corporal punishment.
Sanctioned it, yeah. Finch describes an obsession with physical abuse by way of spanking.
Based on
A literal reading of, spare the rod, hate your children. It was the most frequent punishment, at home and Christian school.
For what kinds of things?
Often for expressing negative emotions or just questioning authority.
And the way it was done.
This is really disturbing. Her parents and teachers would actually pray with me both before and after they hit me.
Pray while hitting.
Before and after. Which solidified this idea that pain and suffering was something God used to discipline the children that he loved.
And that connected later to self-harm.
She says it led her to justify self-harm later on, because pain was framed as discipline, even love. And, the American Academy of Pediatrics completely opposes spanking.
Right. That's important context. Then there's the sexual suppression aspect.
Which sounds particularly insidious. No real sex education, she says. Just abstinence talk.
Leading her to believe
that her genuine curiosity about my body or my genitals would lead me down a path of destruction.
So natural curiosity became dangerous.
Exactly. Igniting a war with myself, believing her sexuality was this uncontrollable addiction, deeply traumatizing every single moment of sexual engagement or even thought.
She felt she could never be good or holy.
Pretty much. She felt she would never be good, correct, moral, or holy simply because of the existence of my sexuality.
And this links back to the body image issues.
Contributed to disordered eating, habitual self-harm, because she was terrified of having a body that I took pleasure in, enjoyed, and was proud of. She literally prayed often to be emptied out of all of my desires.
It begs the question again, why stay in that environment?
Right. And Finch explains that, ironically, as terrifying as her beliefs were, they also became an escape from a tangible, frightening reality. She mentions an abusive mother, bullying at school.
So God became a refuge in a strange way.
This God became her only team member, as she puts it. And she dedicated herself completely to pleasing him.
Even allowing
him to, in her mind, tell her parents to hit her because they loved me. It's a really complex psychological situation.
So what's the takeaway from all this personal experience? What's the long-term impact?
The chronically internalized fear and shame, she says, just steadily eroded her sense of safety.
Leading to a belief that
this was the way it will always be, and this was the way it was supposed to be, a kind of learned helplessness.
And no outlet for grief or anger.
No. Expressing that would make her an unfaithful, double-minded individual. And as Finch powerfully puts it, when you sweep an emotion under the rug, you sweep it into the nervous system.
That's a great line. It perfectly sets up the next part. Understanding the actual impact, maybe even getting a diagnosis like religious trauma syndrome.
Exactly. Because what's compelling now is that huge numbers of people are leaving evangelical Christianity.
Right. You mentioned the stats earlier. The Pew Study, Public Religion Research Institute.
Yeah.
A noticeable drop.
Yeah, 6% decrease in white evangelicals between 2006 and 2016 alone.
And Finch attributes this exodus not just to politics or culture.
No, primarily, she argues, it's because our societal understanding of trauma is growing.
Ah, so people have the language now.
People are increasingly able to identify their own psychological and physiological experiences within the definition of trauma. Our cultures are becoming more trauma-informed.
So they recognize the symptoms, the triggers.
Exactly. And they're waking up to their own intuitive wisdom, that inner voice telling them to seek safety and leave authoritarian, abusive, and traumatic institutions.
And this whole psychological and physiological experience, it actually has a name.
It does. Religious trauma syndrome, or RTS.
Coined by Dr. Marlene Weinell, a psychologist.
Right. And RTS really describes the condition of people struggling with leaving an authoritarian, dogmatic religion and then coping with the damage of that indoctrination.
And it's often compared to PTSD.
Yeah, often described as a combination of PTSD and complex PTSD, or CPTSD.
What's the difference with CPTSD again?
CPTSD usually comes from prolonged, repeated trauma, often in situations where escape is difficult or impossible, like childhood abuse or arguably this kind of religious environment.
Okay, so stepping back, what does Weinell identify as the root causes of RTS?
Two main things: toxic theology and authoritarianism, reinforced constantly church, school, home.
And how does that play out?
Where? Suppression of normal child development, for one. Damage to thinking and feeling abilities because independent thought is condemned. Information is limited.
Control is external, not internal.
Exactly. Knowledge is revealed, not discovered. It's enforced by a hierarchy, and the individual self is seen as totally unreliable. Plus, the repression of sexuality and the use of corporal punishment are explicitly named as physical and sexual abuse within this framework.
That makes me wonder, why is it so incredibly hard for people to break free from this?
Weinell points to this cyclical trap. Doctrines like original sin and eternal damnation create what she calls an ultimate double bind.
Meaning?
Meaning you're told you're inherently guilty, fundamentally flawed,
Hmm.
but there's nothing you can actually do about it yourself. You need external salvation.
Which creates this unending cycle.
Exactly. A cycle of shame, then relief when you conform, then back to shame. And even after someone leaves, that huge psychological damage doesn't just disappear overnight.
Especially the fear of hell.
That fear particularly can sometimes last an entire lifetime, Weidel notes.
And you mentioned earlier, it often gets misdiagnosed.
Yeah, that's a critical problem. RTS symptoms, the anxiety, depression, OCD tendencies, eating disorders, they're frequently mistaken for other things. Because for so long, they just haven't been seen as connected to religious doctrine. Plus, there's this wider cultural assumption, that religion generally does more good than harm.
So therapists might miss the root cause.
Very easily. Finch makes a really strong argument here. She contends evangelicalism is dangerous because its teachings require belief in and acceptance of things that are psychologically and behaviorally maladaptive.
And easily lead to extremism.
Yeah. What are the key elements that lead her to say that? How might that view challenge common ideas about religion?
Well, her main focus is really on the authoritarian aspect. That's what she finds especially problematic.
Why that specifically?
Because it communicates that all that is good, sacred, or correct is external to you, and everything internal is considered bad.
But fostering dependence.
Profound codependence, yeah, and a deep mistrust of your own self, your own intuition. This exclusivity and authoritarianism, she argues, inevitably lead to disconnection.
Disconnection
From self, from other people, and from the outside world. The intense focus is always on God and a future world, separating people from their basic human needs right now.
So the core doctrines themselves are traumatic.
Finch believes so. She says they're extremely traumatic because they distort the way the human psyche would naturally function and thrive.
That's a bold statement. What about people who seem fine within the system?
She actually wonders about that. She speculates if those who appear untraumatized might just be compensating for their trauma in unhealthy ways, most often through compulsive behavior and addictive patterns, sort of masking the underlying distress. So she's not really mincing words here.
Not at all. She declares, fundamentalist evangelicalism is toxic, traumatic, and extremely dangerous. And she firmly believes that those who have left, they are indicative of the greater underlying dysfunction of the entire system. Their departure is a symptom of the system's flaws.
Okay, let's pivot then to how this trauma actually shows up physically in the body.
Right, the physiological impact.
To understand why RTS is seen as a form of PTSD, maybe quickly revisit PTSD basics.
Sure. So, when you face a threat, your brain signals the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. That gets you ready for fight or flight, adrenaline, cortisol, all that.
But if the trauma is prolonged, Or you can't fight or flee.
Then the body often defaults to a freeze response.
Right.
It basically immobilizes you. Think deer in headlights.
And PTSD emerges when?
When those stress responses, the hypervigilance, the anxiety, they persist long after the actual threat is gone. Your body is still stuck in danger mode.
And a key factor is dissociation.
Right. That's a really crucial factor in predicting PTSD, whether dissociation occurred during the trauma, kind of mentally checking out.
Why does that matter so much?
Because when the body freezes or dissociates, it can't release that huge surge of internal energy built up for fight or flight. That energy stays trapped.
Making the trauma feel like it's still happening?
Exactly. It doesn't get filed away as past. It feels present, immediate.
And that impacts your ability to feel safe now.
Totally. It messes with your ability to orient toward safety. You might start perceiving everyday things, people, places, feelings. Maybe your whole environment is dangerous.
Finch mentioned clients who couldn't tell anxiety from excitement.
Yeah, because the physical sensations can be similar, but the trauma lens interprets everything as threat. In extreme cases, it can lead to severe social isolation, or even just a deep distrust of your own body's signals. Or the opposite. Numbness, yeah. An inability to access emotions, feeling empty, that's another manifestation.
This brings up a really crucial point Finch makes about what trauma is.
Yes, she emphasizes it's the response to an event and whether or not the body was able to seek an energetic resolution.
Not necessarily the event itself.
Not the nature of the event itself. That's key. She powerfully states, you don't necessarily need to physically experience a place of eternal conscious punishment to be traumatized.
Just hearing about it is enough.
Being told it exists and imagining what it could be like may suffice. The threat is enough.
And the Adverse Childhood Experiences study supports this.
Yeah, the ACE study found that spending your formative years in fear, without permission or a way to express that fear or seek safety, that's almost certain to develop and experience CPTSD. The chronicity and lack of escape are key.
And what's really insidious about this is how it can live in the body without conscious awareness.
Exactly. Upsetting emotions, disturbing body sensations, and confusing behavior impulses can all exist in implicit memory without any conscious access.
Yeah.
You don't know why you feel or react the way you do.
So healing has to involve the body.
Healing, therefore, requires reclaiming that connection to your own body, your intuition, and the insular nature of evangelical subculture, she points out.
Makes escape impossible for kids.
Right. Escape from those threatening teachings isn't possible for many people, particularly children and adolescents. There's truly nowhere to run or hide from what you are told is an eternal reality, an unchangeable inner nature, or an all-seeing God.
You're trapped with the fear. Stepping back again, there's this field, psychoneuroimmunology.
Right, the mind-body connection science. It shows us that chronic psychological stress actually creates physiological changes. It affects long-term health.
So Finch argues that being forced to fight your own nature.
Being forced to wage war with their flesh and their personalities in order to be considered holy. She argues that likely suppresses immunological responses, makes you more vulnerable physically.
And she lists physical symptoms.
Yeah, things often linked to chronic stress, extreme weight fluctuations, migraines, chronic pain, digestive issues like IBS.
Even low sex drive.
Even low sex drive, because, as she points out, sexual arousal mimics the physiological experience of fear in the body. Increased heart rate, breathing changes. So the body might interpret arousal as danger.
And the author experienced this herself, the overlap between different kinds of abuse.
Yes, she recognized the overlap between symptoms from her parental abuse and her religious abuse. She says, repetitive beliefs instilled during formative years imprint upon the individual.
And critically, intent doesn't matter.
Exactly. Ill intention is not a prerequisite for trauma or pain. Even well-meaning parents and teachers, she stresses, can cause deep harm by passing on these evangelical beliefs.
But the neurological impact sounds profound, too.
It is. Being raised with these frightening, inescapable beliefs leads to trauma that isn't easily recognized or recovered from.
Yeah.
Because it's literally shaping the developing brain.
How so?
Children taught their bodies are evil, that they can't trust themselves. That specific worldview gets imprinted neurologically. So for those raised this way,
any mistake feels catastrophic.
Any single moment of perceived failure, any mistake, any step outside the previously established lines can paralyze with life-altering fear, anxiety, shame, and dread.
Why?
Because the trauma of early teaching is essentially playing on a loop within us. It's wired in.
She describes her brain developing in a state of restriction.
Restriction, hesitation, and lack, rather than permission, wholeness, and freedom. That's how she puts it.
Which means your sense of worth is always conditional.
Worthiness, belonging, and safety are entirely conditional. Our comfortability with our own identity is conditional.
Mm.
And in this really painful twist,
Mm.
pleasure becomes dangerous, pain becomes discipline, and discipline masquerades as love.
That's a powerful summary. So how can someone even begin to escape that ingrained fear?
That's the bind, right?
Mhm.
Finch explains evangelicalism promises safety, but often drives believers deeper into fear and helplessness.
And if you express that fear, if you're affected by imagining hell,
Often, she says, they are rebuked or their fears dismissed, told to have more faith, basically,
which she experienced
as emotional torture. She couldn't fight the fear, couldn't flee the environment or the beliefs. Leaving freeze is the only option.
stressing everything.
Suppressing all that inner turmoil and trauma.
Yeah.
Just shutting down.
Okay. So after laying out this really comprehensive picture of the trauma and its impact, let's talk about healing, the path forward.
Right. Recovery from religious trauma syndrome.
Marlene Waynell outlines phases: separation, confusion, avoidance, feeling, rebuilding.
And Finch notes this really mirrors Peter Levine's general outline for healing other trauma.
Which involves
Leaving the traumatic environment, establishing a sense of safety now, and then, crucially, releasing those trapped emotions.
how does the separation phase often begin? It sounds like a huge step.
It is huge. And Finch says it often starts either through great love or great suffering.
Interesting dichotomy. How so?
Well, many leave because they fall in love with someone who doesn't share their beliefs, right? Or they connect with others outside the bubble who challenge their worldview. That's the great love path.
And the great suffering.
Others, like Finch herself, leave because the pain becomes unbearable. Maybe community betrayal, rejection, which then often manifests physically.
Like the symptoms you mentioned before.
Exactly. Gastrointestinal issues, insomnia, chronic fatigue, panic attacks. The body just can't take it anymore.
Where Finch's own body literally rebelled.
That's how she describes it. It's months of panic attacks every time she even entered a house of worship. Until finally, she allowed herself to prioritize her own needs, her own well-being, over the religious expectations.
That must have been a turning point.
The first time, she says, she gave herself permission to leave, to stop chasing shadows of feelings and actually engage with her doubts.
And she realized.
She realized she'd been waiting for that permission for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And her body's signals, those panic attacks, they saved me.
That's powerful. So stepping back, once she left that influence.
She began to hear her own inner voice again. Slowly, she was able to reintegrate those previously separate parts of myself back into one whole identity.
But it was painful.
Incredibly painful. She lost most relationships, her whole social structure, her previous sense of purpose. Huge loss.
But that led her to study the teachings.
Yes, she dug into fundamentalist doctrines and realized they just crumbled in the light of logic, reason, history, and science.
And that led to discovering RTS.
Right. Finding the terminology, realizing she wasn't alone, and that ignited this desire to help others heal too.
Okay, so after separation comes confusion and avoidance.
Yeah, and she notes these phases are often a circular dance. It's not linear.
Why circular?
Because the previously provided foundation of certainty is suddenly gone. You're adrift. And without support, connecting with emotions is really hard.
Because of the old messages.
Those former shaming voices whisper that your emotions are sinful, unreliable. But accessing grief, she stresses, is crucial to any and every healing process.
Grief signals the end of the trauma cycle.
It signals the cycle has completed, yeah.
Yeah.
Allows for release.
But the symptoms can persist. The fear, the anxiety.
Oh, yeah. Finch observes that even after you intellectually reject, say, the fear of hell or the rapture,
Yeah.
that anxiety, that fear can reawaken powerfully in your body. Guilt is often a big ongoing issue, too.
So your head knows one thing, but your body feels another.
Exactly. You know something intellectually, but you still feel in your body. That implicit memory is still running.
And complicating all this is finding the right support.
Hugely complicating. Because many therapists, counselors, helping professionals, they just don't understand the specifics of the evangelical experience.
So they might inadvertently cause more harm.
Potentially, yeah. By dismissing the trauma as not real or imposing their own religious or secular worldviews instead of truly listening and validating the person's reality.
What about anger? Where does that fit in?
Anger plays an essential role in recovery, which is fascinating.
How so?
It often comes before the grief. It kind of ushers in the grief needed to complete the trauma cycle.
Anger signals acknowledgement.
Yes, it signals, okay, I recognize what happened to me and it wasn't okay. But many survivors avoid anger
Why?
because they were taught forgiveness and forgetting are the only acceptable Christian responses. Turn the other cheek, right?
But Finch says anger is necessary.
She stresses the need for permission to be angry in order to begin to heal, and also the need to develop the capacity for being able to advocate for themselves. Anger can fuel that.
So, recovering individuals need to reconnect with their emotions, validate their intuition.
Absolutely. Understand their feelings, trust their gut again as a valid inner resource. She even mentions auditing a Science of Happiness course in her mid-20s.
Why?
Because she was so numb, so disconnected from her own joy, she literally had to relearn what happiness felt like.
Stepping back, reclaiming an autonomous life seems vital.
It's central. Losing your old faith story means losing your whole meaning-making system for life.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. But the good news, she says, is our brains are elastic. Neuroplasticity.
Meaning we can heal.
Our minds can experience healing by exchanging stories, and over time our bodies follow suit. Trauma therapy, she says, is largely all about unlearning.
Unlearning those old patterns.
Yeah, it's slow, but it's possible.
And Finch emphasizes embodiment as key.
The primary component for healing from this, she argues, is awareness of embodiment, getting back into your body.
Through techniques like
Massage therapy, somatic bodywork therapies that focus directly on body sensations, yoga, breath work, anything that increases body awareness.
and touch-based therapies.
Right. Things like EMDR and EFT eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing, and emotional freedom techniques. They're often highly effective, she notes, sometimes more so than just medication for these deep-seated issues.
And reorienting towards pleasure. How does that work?
It's deeply tied to validating the pain you experienced, because suppressing the heavy emotions, grief, anger, fear, also limits your capacity for the positive ones like joy, pleasure, connection.
So you have to feel the bad to feel the good.
Pretty much. To rebuild, you have to establish this relationship with your body, your intuition, your personal agency. Without that foundation,
You risk falling into something else controlling.
you risk falling into another authoritarian influence, trading one system for another.
She uses storytelling in her coaching.
Yes, as a healing modality, emphasizing the importance of owning your voice, owning your story, your narrative.
And she shares examples from narrative medicine.
Really powerful examples, like a woman who healed from lupus after fully owning her story, telling her body she didn't need the illness anymore.
Wow. And she's seen similar things with her clients.
Yes. Chronic illness reversals, cancer disappearing, natural conception after infertility, sexual dysfunction healing.
Through what?
Through writing, creating, validating their anger, their sadness, the full emotional truth of what they experienced as abuse, giving voice to it.
And she contrasts this with the evangelical explanation for illness.
Right. The narrative that illness is either attacks from evil forces or some kind of spiritual test from God.
Creates a dangerous feedback loop.
Exactly. It further dissociates people from their bodies, keeps them looking for external causes or solutions, and can actually keep them sick.
So dismantling that dogma is key.
Dismantling it, recognizing its fallacy, validating the real harm done. That allows people to finally explore and even delight in their own humanity, free from those restrictive explanations.
So what does this incredible journey of healing mean for you, the listener?
Well, the whole work of healing, as Finch presents it, really hinges on the practice of embodiment.
And that hinges on awareness.
And so much of that practice hinges upon increased personal awareness. It starts simply, just noticing.
Noticing what?
Noticing what has been harming you, bearing non-judgmental witness to yourself, to your own experience. That's the first step.
But can we truly recover from something so deep?
Finch offers this really hopeful analogy.
Yeah.
When a young tree is injured, it grows around its injury.
Oh.
It doesn't erase the wound, but it incorporates it, keeps growing.
Our bodies do that too.
Our bodies too, she says, respond to their environments honestly. They grow tenaciously around the wounds of the past, the symptoms themselves, the trauma responses.
Contain the energy for healing.
Surprisingly, yes. They contain the very energies needed for healing if we can learn to work with them instead of fighting them.
This deep dive has really given us, I think, a profound understanding. Religious trauma, the courageous journey of healing.
Yeah, from the history, the shifts in evangelicalism, right down to the deeply personal physiological impacts.
And then finally to that transformative process of recovery, embodiment, self-reclamation.
And a really compelling takeaway here is Finch's call to action at the end. For those who have healed,
What's the call?
to step up and help lead others out. Many who used to be pastors, teachers, leaders, they might feel aimless after leaving.
Right. Lost purpose.
But their purpose, their stories, their meaning, it can be reborn into this passion for integrating the whole person, for wholeness right here and now, not just in the afterlife.
So it's like a new kind of mission.
A greater commission, maybe.
Oh.
Healing those who are leaving, yes, but also increasing cultural awareness about the harmful nature of some of these teachings.
To dismantle systems that hinder flourishing?
Exactly, to dismantle systems that prevent human flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
And for those whose safety, lovability, acceptance felt entirely dependent on evangelical Christianity,
There's an invitation.
a profound invitation to a new life, a life where you belong inherently.
Which brings us to a final question maybe for you to ponder.
Yeah.
If our bodies really are on our team, as the author suggests, and if just recognizing what has harmed us is that crucial first step, how might this awareness, this understanding of the often unseen impacts of belief systems enable all of us to stand more firmly in the knowledge
It's in knowledge.
that all people are safe, loved, and accepted just as they are, without condition?
That's a powerful thought to sit with.
A powerful thought to carry with you indeed. You are your own, just as you have always been.